Welcome back to Unmuted Nation. It's time for another segment of the Cabinet. And today, two members of the Boss FM Digital News team are joining me. Welcome, Darin and Ignacio. Guys, welcome to Unmuted Nation.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Hey, I'm glad you guys could join. So I'll jump right into it. If you're watching the Cabinet for the first time or listening to it for the first time, this is a place where we have cultural and just really community conversations that it's good for us to have the conversations here. It's good for people to pay attention to those conversations and engage here. But my hope is that you take these same conversations back to your family and your friends. With what's going on in our country, hopefully you're still quarantining and having those conversations on FaceTime or text. So nevertheless, Darin and Ignacio, you guys are joining this for the first time. So I want you guys to have the freedom to say your true thoughts and just give me some perspectives that I can't tap into. Part of the reason that I'd like to do this is because we're all over the place, and sometimes we talk at each other, we post at each other, we make subtweets about each other, but we don't really talk to each other. And so many times we just don't really understand what's going on. I think in so many ways that's problematic. One of the things I haven't talked about this week, I've actually been ignoring it as much as possible, and I didn't even tell the team that I was going to talk about this. And I told you guys moments ago, is Kanye West. And people feel differently about Kanye West based on when they were introduced to him. And, you know, it makes a huge impact on how they perceive him and also what they draw from his artistry. And so for me, I've been into music my entire life. I spent some time as a DJ prior to at the beginning of my media career. And so Kanye and his artistry has always been something that I admired just because it was very distinct. He had something special about the way that he delivered. And watching him over time, I've made the decisions and my what I feel. But before I share that, I guess I'm interested in you guys. And the first question I ask is like, when did you discover Kanye West? And Darin, I'll start with you.
Well, probably around the time that he released My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, because that's where I kind of really came into like being a hip hop fan, right around probably like the start of the 2010s, and that was when that album came out. And I mean, obviously, that was probably the best work he's ever put. I mean, well, you know, in my opinion, it's the best work he's ever put out. And you know, it's like I understand how he has the potential to be such a brilliant artist in terms of what he can do and everything, and obviously his work as a producer with a bunch of other artists like, you know, Jay-Z, for example, and everything he's done with that. I mean, everyone knows that he has a great mind for music,
right?
And so you know, and I was able to see that. So you know, I've always thought he has a great mind for it, and even, you know, although it's been a little. Well, you know, with everything that's gone on with him recently, it's been definitely
it's been a journey. We'll get there in a second. Ignacio, when did you discover Kanye West?
Yeah, so I remember being a little kid, and I'm from Venezuela, so like it was at that moment. But I remember going through channels, and there was this MTV concert, I think, and it was about Kanye West, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty cool," but I didn't know it was Kanye West. And a couple of months later, I heard Stronger because I was really a fan of Daft Punk. And when I heard, oh, this version of Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger with Kanye West, I was like, wow, this is cool. And other than that, I didn't follow him that much. Besides, like the songs that were pretty popular.
Yeah.
But then lately I've been listening to him a little more just to understand his artistry and kind of compare with his persona out of it, which
Yeah,
sometimes.
it can really be night and day, and I think that the reason, and thank you both for sharing your thoughts and even your truth of when you first were introduced to him, because it really does. I don't think first and foremost that if people really consider that people have everyone met him at a different time, and so there's something that they drew from him. For most of us, it was artistry. We saw someone that was dedicated to his work, intentional with his work, had a message with his music, and whether you were young or older, you met him at a certain time, and you kind of add that to whether you are empathetic or sympathetic or have compassion for what's happening right now, and you're not really sure. A lot of us aren't really sure. I think if you listen to doctors or people that are trying to psychoanalyze him from afar, many people say that it's a classic case of someone that's just not taking their medication. He's told us that he believes that his bipolar diagnosis is a superpower, which is interesting with that diagnosis specifically. That it could literally be the diagnosis that we're talking to, like when he says things like that. But because of that, you being from Venezuela, and Darin, you're from
Novi, Michigan, which is probably about 40 minutes outside Detroit.
Okay, all right. So I mean, there's no doubt he's a global celebrity. That makes him somewhat of a polarizing figure, and so there's people that are not just fans of his artistry, but just fans of him in general. And so, that's kind of how fans work. People consume it, and they want to be a part of everything. With his latest ramblings of running for president, do you think that he may be offering confusion to anyone, or do you think because I think, again, this kind of goes back to the reason I asked the question, because also we can get jaded because of the circles that we spend time in or the friends that we have, and we may know, like in our circle, like whether you just think he's sick, or some people think he's a total lunatic. Sometimes some people just think this is who he is. People are in different corners, but the synopsis in most of my circles is like no one's even paying him attention. People won't vote for him, or they're not distracted by it. But I've heard the other thing. I've actually heard people that says we should listen to what he's saying. He's speaking the only truth, and so people are all over the place. I'm curious to what you're hearing, or even if this is a discussion point, or is it just like Kanye? Kanye is Kanye again. Darin?
Well, I mean, like if you just go through the ramblings just at face value, I mean, you can at least from what I would think, it seems a little strange. I mean, he's always been a controversial public figure with some of the stuff he did. I mean, obviously going up and interrupting Taylor Swift and everything like that. I mean, he's had a number of different times where he's gone against the grain in terms of how you would think someone may act, in public. But
absolutely,
yeah. But like when it comes to like the ramblings, everything like that, I feel like, because obviously there's been a lot of discussion about his bipolar disorder, about his mental health, and he's about and with some of the tweets he put out about his wife Kim Kardashian. I think a great thing to do is to look at what the statement she put, because despite all the stuff that Kanye said about her and her mom, which one would think like, why would he ever put that out on Twitter? I mean, it's for her to come out and be in support of him and to implore people to be, to try and understand, the difficulties that someone can go through in terms of their mental health and things like that, and to still be supportive of him. I think it's a very, I'm sure it's something to where she's probably personally struggling with in terms of trying to, try and keep their relationship in the right place and try and help him be as right as he can be. So I think people just, you don't have to agree with what he says. And obviously some of the stuff he may say, you just think is wrong. But at the same time, I feel like in terms when it comes, we can't just not take mental health out of the equation. And I think just people need to just understand, like, it's a different process for everybody. And if this is, if he might have to, even if he goes through, cycles or times like this where maybe where maybe people think he's acting erratic. Well, maybe to us he is, but obviously we don't know everything that's going inside his head. So I think it's just important to not, hold him accountable, but don't demonize him just because, because he just wants to run for president and everything like that, or just at least take into account, how he might be, the things that he might be going through and how that might, and stuff like that.
Yeah. What else may be going on? Ignacio, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated because I believe some fans of him are not separating being a fanatic of his music from the outside perspective of like his political views and all that stuff, which you might agree or disagree with him. To generate confusion, I don't think so, uh, personally. But at the same time, it is like he's going through a state of he's not okay. He's going through some stuff that he's not in his right mind, and I believe his wife is taking it very well, like despite all the rants
Right.
and
I
that
mean,
stuff.
as best she can, right? Because
Yeah, as best as she can, because sometimes you do have to understand, like, hey, mental health sometimes leads you to do stuff like that. Um,
do you think we have enough conversations about mental health? Do you think that just people are cognizant of how impactful mental health actually is on the livelihood of individuals? Do you think that, because I think if we had more conversation, and maybe not, people wouldn't be so quick to judge some of these outbursts, because mental illness is not really partisan, or it's not particular about who it chooses. It can be anyone at any time. That can kind of be, it's just like an illness. It's the same thing. So do you think more conversation would kind of help the way that people respond to him?
I think that first of all, the media doesn't care about that. They just care about, hey, Kanye ranted to his wife and her mom, instead of like, oh, why did he do it? Is it because he's not taking his medication? And you see very few social medias and people that do mention that. But other than that, it's just, for me, it's just gossip. People wanting to gossip about it.
Got it. What do you think, Darren?
No, I don't think we talk about it enough, because, and it kind of reminds me of a couple of years ago where a player for the Cleveland Cavaliers basketball team, Kevin Love, he suffered an anxiety attack when he was on the court or on the bench or something of that nature. And, he had to go back in the locker room, and even his teammates were like wondering, where'd you go? Why didn't you come back on the floor? Like, what's wrong with you? And it's, and it became a whole big deal about like trying to understand that, it's not just, I mean, when it comes to athletics, obviously, it might be a little bit different in certain situations, but, mental, it's, you have to, empathy is something that I just don't think a lot of people practice enough, it seems like. Because when you're looking at situations like that, it's like, you don't know what's going inside a person's head. I mean, you can try and understand, and you can try and judge based on what they're doing, but it's like, I mean, you can't ever really, unless you really talk to them and they actually explain to you, you can't really know what's inside a person's head in terms of what they may be thinking or how they may be feeling and stuff like that.
It's very difficult to understand either what causes mental illness or certain mental illnesses in some ways, and it's also difficult to understand for people to empathize with something that they haven't been educated on. And I think that the lack of conversation kind of stimulates also that lack of education, and it's rampant. It's something I think that we're gonna have to take hold of as a culture and as a community, to ensure that some of these conversations happen so that people understand. I think you'll always have the jokes, and you'll always have critics, and you will always have analysis of people in popular culture, and that's the job. That's some people, that's just what they're here to do. But I think educated analysis will aid the way that we interpret some of these behaviors, and it won't seem like it's just another episode, and you never know. Kind of with Kanye, it's interesting because you just never really know And it makes you wonder that if you hear something that you agree with, which Kanye is that? Which one are you talking to? And so I think people are just he's a interesting character, but I'm interested to watch because I'm not sure what's going to happen. Before I let you guys go, I'm also interested in just how it's a question that I've been asking all week because I think we've all been affected differently. But we're now 5 months into a COVID-19 pandemic and a global pandemic that our country has responded to in a really unique way. I'm interested to find out how has everything affected you. Ignacio, I'll start with you this time.
Well, it started in March, right? So I'm also a DJ, just like when you started, Alex, and I had months booked for gigs and stuff, all of them canceled, which really affects financially.
Talk about
Uh,
it. I think, and you know what, I'm going to give you this time to talk about it because I do understand that, especially and I think that we haven't had enough conversation about artists and people that kind of work in a field that is dependent on gigs in the broad conversation of this pandemic. And it's really important because a lot of times artists in this sense are providing the entertainment for people in so many ways, and they're not thinking about how their entertainers are getting paid. And the immediate thought is, especially for more A-list celebrities, that people that are in entertainment, period, are good. They're just okay, and they're going to be fine. But you had gigs planned, and they were all canceled. How have you been able to deal with that?
well, I mean, doing research, because some artists have found the way of doing live streams or doing online concerts, which is fine. I'm doing research about it to see if I'm able to do it, but it's not the same. You don't have that audience engagement. You don't really see if what you're playing is working on. So it's just not the same, and it feels weird to just be in your room doing. It's kind of a practice where people are watching you.
It's not as easy as it looks. I'll say that. And it's like, I think, we've had some people that have kind of amassed a following on Instagram, and they've done good things and been able to connect with people in good ways, but it's not as easy as it looks. The platforms don't even make it that easy. And even when it comes to something like this, I'm in New York. I've been at home for like 25 weeks. And so this is obviously not the ideal setting for me to even be doing this, but here we are, and we're all trying to figure out how to navigate this. Darin, how have things changed for you over the last few months?
Well, I mean, quite a bit because I'm still going to school at Michigan State right now. I was going through this past year, my junior year, and I'd had a study abroad plan for 6 weeks for like the middle of May to the middle of June and everything. And so like I had stuff happen. And then once once that hit in like early March, it's just, everything shut down. I mean, I was just, it was like the day before, I was in my apartment going to my classes, doing what I would usually do. And then after that, it's like within 2 days, so abroad gets canceled, all my classes moved online, and, I go home just because it's like, I mean, there's nothing else for me to do at school. It's like, it's just such a shift from what I had been used to. And then, although, I mean, at the same time, it still has provided opportunities. Obviously, I don't know if I would be, I would be on the show with you, and I would be interning at Unmuted and Boss FM if my study abroad may have been canceled, and maybe if I didn't get that opportunity. So where one opportunity falls through, another still pops up, and I'm still doing, important work, and I'm still getting great experience that I've still been able to, advance I've still been able to do good work even throughout this, this whole pandemic. And overall though, I mean, it's not anything that I haven't been able to really adjust to. I mean, yeah, it can be feel tedious or feel boring at times, just being at home a lot and everything like that, when you would like to be going out and being more active and doing more things. Yeah. But I mean, that's the adjustments we all have to make, and that's the sacrifices we all have to make to try and make sure that we stay safe, our family and friends stay safe, and everything like that, and that we take the proper measures to try and help limit this pandemic as much as we possibly can.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And please, just I'm encouraging people, especially, I'm in. Well, this was the epicenter for a long time. No, my listeners are sick of me saying I live across the street from a hospital, so I saw a lot of things firsthand. And it's less seeing it, but even hearing the trauma of the people losing their family members daily, it can kind of take a toll on you. But you made a great point. There's an opportunity here, and I think knowing that we're probably going to be in this for the long haul, I think for those that haven't tapped into the opportunity, there's still a large amount of time for you to figure things out. We're in this together, and we got to do the best that we can. Gentlemen, thank you for coming through the cabinet. Hopefully you'll come back, and I appreciate you sharing your thoughts and candidly and just being honest about it this morning. Joining me in this segment of the cabinet is Jalisa Zimmerman and Drew Miles from Boss FM News. Welcome back to the cabinet for both of you.
Hey, how you doing?
What's going on? Well, the conversation continues as always, and this country, so much going on in the country. People don't want to talk about, people are ignoring, or people just don't know. And for 60 days now, Portland. Well, let's just say this. The people are, so many things have been hijacked, and I want to talk to you guys a little bit about that hijacking. And I've been trying to reframe this conversation all week long. As we talk about Black Lives Matter, Drew, we talked about it earlier this week. Right. You've got the movement, you have the organization, you have people that are engaging in a lot of ways. For the first time, tons of people involved in this Black Lives Matter movement are not Black. So great for that. Welcome. Thank you. I can't give you much praise for doing what you should have always done, but thank you for that. And now you have people attempting to weaponize Black Lives Matter. I saw a meme this morning that said, I support everyone, but I don't support hate organizations like BLM and the KKK. And I'm like, listen, sometimes it gets so outrageous, it just doesn't even make any sense. Literally, the movement, Black Lives Matter, like Black lives, like those words mean something individually. Yeah. Lives mean something, matter means something, Black means something. Ku Klux and Klan stands for something. That's a total. There's a non-equivalency there, and so I don't even I do understand the attempt to always make it us against them, but when it's been them against us forever, for as long as my ancestors have been on this land, I think that it's a moot point to even try to make this false equivalent narrative that people like Terry Crews are trying to push, that we don't want to get so passionate about Black lives that we create Black supremacy. And people quote Martin Luther King for saying that. That's, yeah, great. Black supremacy would be terrible, but it will never happen because white supremacy it runs so deep. It's just impossible. So we shouldn't even waste time talking about it. There's not, and the blatant problem is, equality is not something that people want to give. And it doesn't come easily. And I think that before we talk about some of the attacks that have been happening, I want to talk about why there's confusion. And do you think that, and I'm going to ask you guys specifically about Black people, do you think that Black people are a little naive to believe, or do you think we have been naive at all to believe that just because we're demanding something, it's going to happen? And the people that we're demanding it from are asking us to ask for it peacefully. Do you think, has that ever yielded results for us? Jalisa.
Yes, absolutely. And to respond to your comment earlier, there is no confusion. White people know exactly what they're doing. There is no confusion. There is no, let's try to get an understanding. That is just flat out false. Yes, I feel like Black people, we can be a little naive, but at the same time, sometimes like the saying is like it just takes one person. When it gets to the severity of our state right now, it doesn't just take one person, it takes everybody. So I think it's naive to think that it only takes one person to make the change. But there's already a division in the Black community anyway. So we just need to find a way to unpack together in order to change it as a whole. Because like you said earlier, it's not just Black people in this movement, but it's for us. So we can't have the whole world fighting for us and not all of us are fighting for us.
Drew, what do you think?
You know, kind of going off of the same thing. I don't know if there is a way that like we can get it across. You know, we go to a peaceful way for so long during the civil rights movement, sit-ins and protests and marches and things like that. And we were beaten, you know, battered and bruised. And now we try to take a different approach to things now that's going on. When starting back in 2014 or 15 when Colin Kaepernick kneeled and things like that. It was just like, okay, now we're disrespecting our country because we're taking a peaceful protest. We can't actually do things the way we want to do them without it being a problem. It can be the right way. It's the wrong way because we're Black, though. You know, so
I agree with you. I think there are a couple of things that Black people need to get on the same page about. First of all, that we are not monolithic. There's just not one way for Black people to do things. There's also, we're not monolithic in movement. So when they call it the Black agenda, there are multiple Black agendas. And so as I say always, if you're Black and you do it, then Black people do it. You know, a lot of us grew up with places and doing things where somebody may have said or assumed that, oh, you're not Black enough. Like, to hell with all of that. If you are Black and you do it, Black people do it. Now, with me taking that stance and giving leeway to people like that, as clowns like Candace Owens, when they share harmful rhetoric, I'm like, I gotta say, Black people sometimes are foolish as well. But again, she is Black. I can't say Black people don't do what she does. There's tons of them. There are. My mom taught us to respect and revere Dr. Ben Carson when I was growing up as one of the most renowned Black brain surgeons, and he turned out to be an ass clown as well. And so here we go. We deal with that, and I think that's okay. I think part of the confusion is I think people are on so many sides of it, and I think it's been dangerous in this country to have a narrative that suggests that Black people should have equality. And to prove that it's been dangerous, the people fighting for it, Martin Luther King, killed by white people. Malcolm X, killed by
we don't
killed. Medgar Evers, killed. And so there's historically, if you try to attack it, you're killed. So at the same time, the people telling you that they'll give it to you if you ask for it peacefully, you know, they turn a blind eye to it or try to make a movement about equality a terrorist organization. And so I think that we are lost about a few things. We hear the word peaceful and don't realize America gave us that word. And the movement, at least the civil rights movement from the 60s, was never about peaceful protesting. It was all about nonviolent. And King, when he taught nonviolence, he knew that his decision to be nonviolent would cause people against him to be violent, which is exactly what it did. So his goal was not to have violence against violence, just because he felt like that then people depending on where you are and what you believe, some people, I hear a lot of times, I'm gonna tell you, for a long time, I got a lot of Martin in me, but I got a lot of Malcolm in me as well. And it is what it is. And I encourage people to, if you have not seen the documentary on Netflix, Who Killed Malcolm X, that's one that you should take time out of your day today after you finish watching this, to watch that documentary, because it'll put some things into perspective just about this country specifically that people don't remember or recognize. To that point, I want to jump into some of the things that are happening. Since protests are still continuing in this country, they have not stopped. And that's the one thing people are confused, because you're not seeing a lot of it on media. We've been having some conversations on how we can bring you more of that coverage and bring you more information on these movements and protests that are still happening. They're still shutting down cities and they're still stopping bridges. And the only ones that you're hearing about are the ones that are being attacked, or people are insinuating that they are trying to incite violence. Portland specifically, I want to talk about because for the last 60 days, they've kind of been going at it. And so we saw that Seattle was under siege. That had taken a portion of their city and kind of held it hostage. Portland has had marches with all types of people, different groups, from moms and the disabled. Like, there's just people participating in this movement. Well, another thing that's been happening is there has been a law enforcement arm that has showed up in these cities and without markings on identifying themselves, showing up in vans and throwing people, snatching them off the street and putting them in vans. The Attorney General of the United States was questioned by the Congress about this on Tuesday and really didn't have much to say about it. There's lots of speculation about why this is happening and who these people are. There's been some claims that they come directly from the Department of Justice, but we know the Department of Justice does not have a law enforcement arm specifically. It oversees many. So if this is just a test, do you think, or what do you think about people being snatched off of the streets by an unidentified law enforcement arm? What comes to your mind? Does this even feel like America? Jalisa?
No. Well, yes, it does actually. Yeah, it does feel like America actually. And reading the articles and watching the news and the press conferences, even though it's a whole bunch of flat out unconstitutional, unlawful things going on, it's not a surprise. It's not really a surprise that only law enforcement are in the protesting that is Black lives, because there are so many supremacy protests that you look around and there's no law enforcement in sight. So these people, these unmarked people that are showing up and grabbing protesters, I read an article where they're not even protesters. Like, some people are just walking around. Like, people live in these cities. People go to stores in these cities. People walk their dogs at night in these cities. People aren't going to stop wearing black just because there's a protest outside. So there are people who aren't really even necessarily protesting that are being targeted and questioned with beanies over their head in these unmarked vans and scared for their lives, not even sure what's going on.
Drew, your thoughts on this randomness?
Well, I guess I can just put in a scenario. Like, imagine you being out either protesting or being around a protest, and you see a van pull up on you and guys unmarked get out with guns and trying to snatch you and throw you in the van. I don't know the gun laws in Portland, but imagine if you can carry your open carry out there, and you have your gun on you, and now you're protecting yourself against cops that's trying to snatch you and throw you in the van. You pull out your gun to protect yourself because you're worried, but they shoot you because they feel threatened, right? You bring this whole thing back into a full circle where it's like, what are you supposed to do? You don't know what's really going on. You're being snatched by some random dudes, and now you're trying to protect yourself, and you might end up dead. But
it's very disheartening. It's also disconcerting because it will take you off guard, and we saw that under this current administration, people have gone to no limits. We saw months ago a news reporter was arrested on live TV amidst the protest in Minnesota right after George Floyd. A CNN reporter was taken off the streets, a Black CNN reporter. Police officers walked right past his white colleague. I don't know if you missed that, but we covered that here. Snatched off the street on live TV, camera rolling, to the point to where the mic was on, the camera was hot, put into a van, not unidentified, but snatched by visible law enforcement for an hour, live TV. And it's crazy because I don't think, while we're talking and we're teaching our kids and our nephews and our nieces how to stay alive when they're pulled over in cars, now we're having conversations about how they stay alive if they go to do what is quote unquote American, fight for their own rights, go to a peaceful protest, and what happens to them if they're snatched up? What happens? And I think it's a conversation that a lot of people were not. I think we'll commit to covering it a little bit more, just because people don't know that it's happening. So there's a lot of blank responses when it comes to answering the question, what do you do in that scenario? Because you don't know. And instead, there's the speculation, and Drew, you gave a great example of what happens. What happens in open carry states if this happens elsewhere? It's happening in Portland right now, but there is a lot of speculation that this is just a test, and they are practicing. It's no doubt that the footage that they're capturing from these protests and the violence that they are inciting, that the Trump campaign has definitely been using it in their commercials and saying that this is what Joe Biden's America will look like, when in fact it's actually Trump's America right now. Like, so that type of trickery, I don't know. It's gonna work on people, but it's nonsense. I don't know. It's really alarming. And I guess here's another alarming statistic that I think, switching gears just a bit. Gentrification in the United States is up 63%.
Wow.
63%. Our major cities are seeing an uptick in gentrification like never before. But and I'll share this story. I don't share it too often, but I do think that there's also a disconnect when it comes to understanding gentrification and why some people let it happen or don't know that it's coming. When you hear the word gentrification, because that's also a word that they try to snatch it back and make it a buzzword of an attack on white people. When you hear the word gentrification, what's your first thought, Drew?
It's weird. I don't want to take too much time, but coming from a country town and stuff like that, it was not too much seen of gentrification. The things have kind of always been the same from where I'm from. Since I recently moved to Chicago, I kind of actually see it firsthand and see how these historical Black areas, or whatever the case may be, in a decent location, just kind of overrun now. And they're building these 900,000 condos, like right in the quote unquote hood areas or the Black areas, trying to push all these Black people out, raising these taxes and getting them out, further out of the city, further out of the south side of Chicago, keep on pushing them out from the 43rd block all the way up to the 100s. They're trying to get all the Black people out of Chicago as much as they can, just throwing them out. And it's worrisome because, like, you don't know what this really is. A lot of people feel like it's a good thing sometimes, but what's wrong with what it is now? Why don't you build up the community that's right there now instead of forcing all these Black people?
Well, I gotta have a thought, and like I said, I'll share a story on that. Jalisa, when you hear the word gentrification, what's the first thought that comes to your mind?
Honestly, my apartment complex. I accidentally moved to a gentrified area. I didn't know. Until I actually lived here and really realized that all of this is new. So what I personally decided to do was I only eat Black businesses outside of the city now, because once I drive outside of the bridge of Dallas, and Dallas, Texas is where I live, that's where I start seeing all these Black people. And I'm like, oh, I just thought I moved to a white neighborhood, but no, I live in a gentrified area and I had no idea. But what I do appreciate is Black people coming back to these areas and still living here and still making it Black. So it's urban and it's gentrified, but Black people are still here. We still have some sort of community in my neighborhood, which makes it a little more comfortable. But I still try my best to only eat at Black businesses and give to the Black homeless people that I see, because I had no idea. So now I'm in a mood where it's like, when I go to neighborhoods, how do I even know if it's gentrified or not if I'm not from there?
Well, a lot of it, and that is what happens most often. And so the basis of generation, and I'm getting live, I'm thinking so much while we're having this conversation about how we can educate on this conversation and on this topic specifically, because what people don't realize is, and it's happened in most American cities that were existing prior to like 1960. But if you get an opportunity, we'll probably put something out there, because I love to educate. Just Google the term white flight. And so it'll show you a time when suburbs were actually built and white people fled cities because they became urban trash cans. And so they wanted to leave areas that were infested, quote unquote. And these are words that you'll find when you research the term white flight. They left and they began to build the suburbs. And so this happened in cities like Atlanta, Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit. Everywhere that has huge suburban communities, thriving suburban communities, which is interesting. I'm not going to share it right now, but Donald Trump tweeted something to suburban communities specifically.
I was going to say that today.
But this is how this all works. It's all, I don't like to give that man my time. Right. But when it comes to white flight, they left these areas and took the resources. Keep that in mind. So when they left, they took the resources, they took the money that was being funneled into schools. And so if you look, there's a series that runs on Sunday, The Different Shades of America, W. Kamau Bell on CNN. It's an interesting series that he does that talks about how funding for schools is based on zip code and the amount of money of taxes that's being paid in that zip code. So resources for books and everything. So what I'm saying is these white flight happened. They took the resources, they left these areas, and Black people. Michelle Obama actually talks about this in her podcast that came out yesterday. That Black people unknowingly, as they started to get means for themselves, adopted that same mentality, and instead of putting back into their communities that have been deserted and left without resources, they moved to these populous areas with white people where they had populated and funneled all of their money and resources into. And so the mentality, which is weird, like this is how white supremacy works, because we start to adopt these mentalities and believe that if I move here, my life's going to be the same. Well, the white people just kept moving further. And so Black people would move further. And it's the same thing happened over and over and over again. So then white people start coming back. They're like, okay, I've gone far enough. Now I'm like 50 miles away. I'm no longer can say I'm a part of that city. I live 50 miles away. So let's move back. So they come back and they take resources. Buildings fall apart, streets fall apart, crime rates skyrocket, people are destitute. They come back and buy things once they've been foreclosed. And then they buy blocks. And then, and I had a conversation, and I'll end with this. When I moved to New York a couple of years ago, and a white girl had a conversation. She's just like, can I ask you something? And you promise that you won't get offended. I'm like, at this point, there's not much a white person that can say. There's nothing a white person can say that's going to offend me at this point. I have taught myself to be like that. But she's like, we come in and we gentrify these areas, and she's like, we make things better. And I don't understand why your community would have a problem with that. And my response to her was, what makes you think that what you're bringing makes things better? If you're basing that on Whole Foods, or the fact that you took the resources and made quote unquote ghettos or urban areas food deserts because the quality of food doesn't make it to those areas, if you're basing it on that, we have learned to live and adapt, but we have built communities that trust each other. And you invading, because it's an invasion, thinking that you're making it better without asking.
Right.
So you just show up in these areas, you want to make it better, and you price these people out. And how are you making the lives for these people better? I'm going to cite an interview from the New York Times that I read a month after I had that conversation with the girl. We have a service, most cities have a service called 311 where you can call the city about certain city services. It's not non-emergency services. In New York, you can use it to call for like noise complaints or telling your landlord, whatever. Harlem, which is a notable place for African American advancement. In 2017, was only receiving on average 30 311 calls a month.
30.
In 2019, that same district in Harlem was receiving over 630 calls per month, often noise complaints and noise violations. The article specifically cited a 95-year-old man, 95. 311 was called on him because he was playing, he liked to play cards in the street. And the complaint was they're playing in the street, they've got the trunk open, and there's a loud music. Well, that's Harlem. That's what this I would go as far as, I don't know this 95-year-old man, but I would go as far as to say he was still alive because he played cards every day with those people. And he literally is quoted in the article saying, I've been playing right here for 50 years. Now they're calling the police because I'm out here playing cards at my house, in my area that you moved to. So we see it often, and we see it a lot, and we see that we don't, oftentimes it takes us by surprise. Like, it happens so quickly, we don't even realize it's happening in our area. I have a suggestion about everything we talked about today before we wrap. But what do you think? What is your response? Well, Jalisa, you gave your response for how you're adapting to your gentrified living space and what you do. Drew, in Chicago, where you're seeing it now, have you responded at all? Do you have thoughts about how they can adapt or slow it down?
I mean, I honestly don't know. Being not from the area, it's different. Still learning everything that's going on. I actually don't live in the area where everything's gentrified, but it's going to be a process. It's going to take people willing to actually buy back their own community, invest in things that's going down or companies that's going down, buy those back. It's a place, Mr. G's out here was a well-known super club type event or entertainment, kind of plaza that's just going down, and they're building all back through 87th Street, trying to take that over. It's a place which was the biggest jazz club in Chicago history. It was called the Forum. It was down off King Drive somewhere on 47th Street. They're trying to take that down. There's a lot of things that people can do to still preserve the integrity of the Black community and invest back into it and give its money back too. So it's going to take the right amount of people sitting down, talking, and figuring out how they can get that done.
No, I agree. And my thought is just that. I think, and I've been saying this for a couple of days now. I think I'm gonna stick with it. One of the main points of confusion is how involved we can become in decisions that are made in our own communities. And so one of the hugest disillusions that Americans have, it's rampant in the Black community, is that you need some type of crazy, surmountable amount of experience to run for something, which is not true. Your citizenship is something that they're soon going to regret that they gave a lot of Black Americans, if I have anything to do with it, because it enables you to do exactly what you want to do, and that means get involved. And so your city councils that are full of people, we look at Congress and we see these people that have been in the same seats since 1973 and 1975. And there's no reason, unless you know what they're doing and you've elected them deliberately, that your congressman in the House should be there for 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah, sure.
When there's an election for their seat every 2 years. And we don't care about any elections until we hear about it. And it's training and conditioning that they've conditioned us to ignore it. They've conditioned us to only think about the presidency and not about the things that affect us specifically. So your city councilmen in the districts that you live in, the mayorships in the districts that you live in, some places have aldermen, and whatever it is, those positions are available. And it's not necessarily about getting the people. This is where we lose it. You don't need a lot of these roles are supposed to be made up of the people of the community. So they're not supposed to be lifelong politicians. You don't go to school to become a congressman. You don't go to school to become a governor. You don't go to school to become a mayor. You don't even need school to do that. That's not a qualification. You need citizenship, and really, you can run for any of these roles. The only one you have to be born in the United States for is the actual president. So you could literally be anything that you want to be. And this is what people they often miss. You think you need to flip the people that voted for these people that have been keeping these people there. All you need is enough people to beat those people that voted for that person.
Right.
So the people that are not voting, the people that you and I know that have not voted at all, or are voting for the first time, or just now realizing based on what they're seeing now that they need to get involved. These are the people that will vote for you. So get out there, do some research, and I'm going to put resources out there for people to start to kind of just dive into the opportunities that are there, because I think that when you see more of us, AOC, a lot of people have heard how polarizing she's been. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the House, she's the youngest woman, a woman of color to everyone, and the reason she's so groundbreaking is not just because she says what she wants, but she's giving her lived experience, and no one out of the 400 other people in Congress look like her.
Yeah.
None of them have her experience. None of them, when she came in there and said, this is the first job that I've ever had that I have insurance. And people from your districts have been telling you this for the entire time that you've been there, and y'all all sit in Congress and argue on other things. And she's in here bringing issues that we all, and so when Congress starts to look like more of us, things will start to change. And that's my suggestion. I think that when we wake up and know that there's things that we can do, I'm afraid to run because I just feel like my mouth. it's just.
It can't be worse than what's going on these days.
No, listen, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. All right, thank you guys for coming back to the cabinet. Drew, Jalisa, as always, it's a pleasure. Anytime you guys have the time, come through.
For sure. Appreciate you having me.
All right, more Unmuted Nation. Actually, Unmuted Nation is done. That's going to do it for today. So remember, we're back here live 1 p.m. Eastern on BossFM Talk. And the cabinet is available to watch in the BossFM app, as well as it'll air on social media and in the BossFM app at 9 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday. Okay, that's going to do it for the nation today. Remember, today is greater. Believe it, speak it, and live it. You have to make the choice to be great. Your situation is not your destination, so go make it your motivation. Y'all have a great day. I will see you tomorrow.